Welcome back, everybody. Today we continue our lesson about the Traxler contour gambit and the critical position which we are studying happen after e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, knight f6. So I would like to remind you that this is the sharpest two knights defense line. And after knight g5 move, black sharply answer with brave bishop c5 move. And last time we were looking the outcome of knight takes f7, bishop takes f2, and king takes f2, which almost guarantee black at least very strong attack after knight takes e4 with incoming or queen h4 or queen e7. So both moves at least given black attack enough for draw. But in case white is going wrong at some point, so black is even celebrating the victory in many games. And we came to conclusion that white is not forced to capture the bishop on f2. So it's also possible to play or king e2 or king f1. So first of all, king e2. I would say that this move cannot be recommended. Indeed, it has an quite historical interest because this was the first game which was played by Traxler in Prague in 1896 against Ronish. And it was the first game where Traxler used his contour gambit. And the game shows us the greatest talent of the Czech composer and innovator. So today's theory basically recommends black just to play queen e7, keeping very strong attack for sacrificed material. But Traxler decided immediately to play knight d4 check. And his opponent moved his king forward to d3, which generally loses the game. Even relatively best king f1, although even then after queen e7, knight takes h8 leads to the crucial attack for black after d7 and d5. So the main problem here is that after e takes d5, black is just playing bishop g4 and white's queen is trapped. Indeed, after white played in this position king d3, white's king cannot be saved. Instead, moving the queen after queen e7, Traxler came here with a great shot. He pushed the pawn immediately b5. White can accept the queen sacrifice after knight takes d8, but after b takes c4 check, easy to realize that white king is completely trapped in the mating net. Let's say after king c3 and knight takes e4, the poor king will be mated very soon after king b4, rook b8 check. All black's pieces are taking part in the attack. King a3, knight b5 check, king a4, knight c5 check, king a5, and here black just plays knight d4, intending rook b5 and intending also king takes d8 and then knight c6 with a checkmate. Same doesn't help for white, even a4. Same, because king takes and once again no way to stop checkmate after knight c6. So what would happen in case white would try keeping its bishop on the diagonal and playing bishop b3? In that case, black is also winning without any trouble. Knight takes e4, sacrificing one more piece. So this is amazing. Black once again offering white the full queen after knight takes d8 and knight c5, check, king c3. Black just needs to free for its bishop the d4 square. One more sacrifice, knight e2. It's like 500 years ago this game was played, but look how great everything. Bishop d4 check, king b4, a5. So black is firmly in control. The rest is pretty obvious. We just check, 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 and finally white's king will be mated. Look at this fourth line. King takes, bishop a6 check, king a5. Even no need to capture the queen. Simply could play bishop d3 check, king b4, knight a6 check. Easy to see that white moves almost always the only move. King a5, sacrificing one more piece, knight b4 check, king takes b4 and c7, c5. White's king is going to be mated. So to conclude everything, after the game which I just showed, played by Tracksler, we can say that both king f2 and king e2 moves leads to the situation where white is struggling very hard for a draw. So that's why in the position after bishop takes f2, once again, king f1 is the best alternative. So, after king f1, white doesn't take the bishop, but prefers capturing the rook after the further queen e7. Knight takes h8. Now black has to prove what compensation he has for a wall rook. It's absolutely clear that after move, let's say, like d3, instead of knight takes h8, white can hardly waste that time, because black is just playing rook f8, and now white has to take the bishop finally. King takes f2 and d5, reaching the almost decisive attack very soon. After e takes d5, knight g4 check. It's time to call in the cavalry after king e1 and queen takes f7. Black is clearly has upper hand. The queen is on the way to f2, when white as usual has his queen side totally undeveloped. So after queen d2, knight d4, with materially almost equal, black is having decisive positional advantage. c3, trying to send away the knight, but black is coming with nice tactics. Knight e3, forcing white to capture on d4, otherwise queen f1, checkmate. C takes d4, e takes d4, and now we can realize how difficult white's position. White cannot move its queen on e2 because bishop g4, and queen has to go out. White could try develop its knight to a3, but in that case black is completely winning. Can you see here the smashing blow? Definitely queen f1 check, force made in 3 moves. Takes, king e2, and forthcoming mate, bishop g4. So white can try, of course, protect against this threat by playing something like h3. Indeed, after queen f4, there is no way to stop queen g3 with a checkmate, or with follow rook comes to f2, in case, let's say, queen e2, check, and black is just simply winning. So let's back to the critical point, and from the line we just studied, easy to realize that white just has no time to protect its position after d3, and white is forced to capture on h8, winning the rook. Now is a good question. So what way black has to develop its initiative? It's absolutely clear that black has no time for capturing the pawn on e4. Because after queen h5, there is white and not black who starts its attack. So let's say g6, knight take g6, instead looking for advantage and the checkmate, black is just losing. So that's why we have to play very, very aggressively. Black has to keep white busy to prevent him from developing his pieces. Only an aggressive move could help with this issue. That's why we have to push d7, d5, freeing the diagonal for the bishop. E takes d5 is usually played, as there is no superior move. So this position already analyzed for more than 100, maybe for 100 years, but still it's quite difficult to find the right evaluation even in such a situation where even computers could help you. So let's say black is having already now 2 completely different options. Option number 1 is knight d4, which was extremely popular. But this leads to a very, very complicated position, and I would rather recommend you to choose more forcing line, bishop g4, because it's even more simple to remember all the lines in such situation, because white is having almost always one answer. So black is rapidly getting out all his pieces for just one idea, to exploit the white's king's position, which is still badly placed in the center. Bishop e2, only answer. Bishop takes e2, check. Queen takes e2, and this is a critical position. So pay attention that black is still having rook down. Indeed, after knight d4, the situation became very, very unclear. So how white has to protect his king? Of course, after knight d4, black has no time for moving the bishop back. That's why knight d4 is playing. If you play just with bishop back, that white is just getting one more piece, the knight, and black's attack is going nowhere. So knight d4 is much more energetic way. The knight duo obtains the key squares in the center, and white's queen and king would soon be targeted. Queen takes f2. Black is having rook and the piece down. Indeed, after long castling, let's try to evaluate this situation. Black gets a very strong compensation for the material disbalance. White has to try stopping rook f8. And then second knight comes to e4 or to g4, leaving white all pieces on the back rank and develop it. After knight c3, which is most natural continuation, and rook takes h8, so black is just rook down, and rook f8 is coming next. King g1. There is many different ways in such a position. Indeed, white is trying to take out its king from the f file. Black attack getting more and more power since white continues moving its king, losing important tempi. But even after the best in this position, move like d3, knight g4, queen g3, and rook f8, extremely difficult for white to play such a position. After king g1 and h5, so the knight on g4 is not hanging anymore, and after move like h3, white is trying to get away this knight from g4. Black is coming with nasty knight f5 with win position, since white has no any solution against forthcoming queen c5 check. For instance, after queen e1, queen c5, black is just winning. Decisive attack. Of course, all these lines are quite complicated. That's why when you decide to think seriously about including the Trackless counter gambit into your repertoire, first of all, you have to understand that you're taking a risk. And second, I recommend you just to study my lessons about the Trackless gambit at least a few times and repeat it and repeat, because there are many different variations, and in different situations you have to find always very precise moves. Let's back to the critical position when instead of pushing d3, white is playing immediately knight g1. So how to continue black's attack in that case? Rook f8 or knight g4. So I guess that knight g4 is quite interesting continuation in that case. Black's position assets are easy to discover. All pieces are dangerously posed towards the king side, and the rook is just one move away from the open file. After queen g3, so we are still coming with the same h5. Now, white has no time for playing h3, since queen c5 wins immediately. There is no way to stop knight e2 check, discovery check. What else? After h3, queen c5, white can try escaping with the king after king f1. But once again, we spent already so much time moving the king from the center to the king side, and now from the king side to the center, that after rook f8 check, black's attack is decisive. King a1, knight f2, attacking the rook. And white has no defense against knight takes c2, with completely winning position. Okay. So knight g4 once again, queen g3, h5. And as we said before, h3 cannot be played. White is trying to move queen d3. But now rook f8. h3. Queen h4. It's hard to believe, but white's position is lost. Indeed, we have to prove it. So black has to show something unusual. So definitely white has no time for moving h take g4, because after check and h take g4 there is no way to stop rook h8. But you can ask, what would happen in case of g3? So what happens then? Black is coming with a fantastic combination. Knight e2 check. Like in the greatest games of Anderson. Black is ready to sacrifice almost all its pieces for reaching the target, the white's king. So black is decoying the c3 knight. This is our main point of the combination. From the critical e4 square. After the knight takes e2 and queen f6, white pieces are in total disharmony. Mate is looming after queen f2 or queen f1 in case of rook h2. And after knight f4, which is the only way to prevent black pieces from reaching the f2 square, black is coming with queen b6 and finally reaching the f2 square. So as you can see, black is having huge attack with the rook down only because white is having big problem with its king, which is all the time just marching from the center to the king side and back, because black's pieces are so strong. So full domination after knight g4. Let's back to this critical position after queen takes f2 alone castling. And we just analyze the knight c3 move. Indeed, the only way for white to put the questions is to thread the d4 knight after c2, c3. So, what to do now? I analyze this position quite seriously, and just to make a long story short, I have to admit that even there black has some very interesting options like rook f8 or with idea to move knight to g4 or knight e4. Also knight g4 is quite interesting, keeping the strong initiative. Everywhere black's attack is so strong, so powerful. So what can we say about those complex lines? Once again, I would like just to repeat what I said before. It's extremely important that when you start playing such sharp opening line like a Tracksler counter gambit, you have to repeat my lessons and try to analyze yourself. So what exactly would happen in outcome of that move or this move? So how exactly you have to react on this white's defense or that white's defense? How to continue your attack? Because once again, as I said, we have to find almost always the quite right continuation, so very precise, because we are just rook down. Let's back to this critical position. To this point. It seems to me that white would do wisely to forget about the dubious attempt to win the game at once after knight takes f7, but rather opt for move bishop takes f7. So instead of trying winning the rook after the forking the queen and the rook after knight takes f7, white is just trying to win a pawn and to keep solid position. So what would happen in such a situation? King e7. This move is much better than king f8 because black has to keep the f file opened. So, and here the critical position has arisen. At the first sign, white is supposed to be fine here. He has a pawn up. Black's king lost the right to castle. Many would think that white should have a better position, and it's not so clear what kind of compensation black has. However, achieving the above-mentioned costs some important time, so black pieces could be easily regrouped to launch a kingside attack, when white has to lose a few more tempi to bring the bishop f7 and the knight on g5 home, and only then trying to complete development. So white is facing the typical dilemma in such a situation: how to stop h6, but at the same way prevent black pieces from being activated. So the bishop must depart from f7, that is for sure. And in that case, white has two main options. The most natural retreat, of course, is bishop b3. And when I played this line on ICC training games and simultaneous exhibitions, that almost 90% of players play here bishop b3. And of course, the strong move bishop d5, which is a patent of greatest Russian chess player Mikhail Chigorin, which according to the theory is the best way to face the Traxler counter gambit. So when bishop d5 offers more options for white, why? Because in many situations white could just trade its bishop for knight, which is intending to come to d4. So after bishop d5 and rook f8, white has to look out the f2 pawn. So black swings his king's rook to the open file f. So black is planning to put his queen to g6 via e8 or even to h5, attacking white's kingside pawns. The potential weakness of the f2 pawn forced white to protect it quickly. Let's say short castle here looks like the best option, because after rook f1, which happened in one of the game of Alexei Shirov against Igor Yefimov in 1991, just allowing black to almost force reach very strong position after queen e8, knight c3, d6, h3, and queen g6. White is in trouble already, since the g2 pawn completely unprotected and will be captured soon. After d3 and h6, Igor Yefimov found himself almost in losing situation. Look what happened. Knight f3, queen take g2. The weak point of the rook to f1 is quite obvious. The pawn g2 is gone and white's position has collapsed. After knight h4, of course, no need to ask Alexei Shirov here. He's coming with a nice shot. Bishop takes f2. After rook takes f2, black's attack develops smoothly after queen g1 check. Rook f1, of course not king e2 because knight d4, and black is just winning immediately. Rook f1, queen g3, king d2, queen g5 check, and here white decided already to call it a day. Look like 15 moves played, and Yefimov already resigned in such a position. Why? After king e2, knight d4 is coming, king e1 is forced, queen takes h4 check, and black already having material advantage and positional advantage. Force coming, bishop takes h3 or queen takes h3, so in this position Yefimov already resigned. So in the next lesson we are going to study more in deep. So how white has to try preventing black from developing its initiative on the king side after bishop d5 and rook f8. And also I would like to carry on some of my games played on ICC in my simultaneous exhibition, just to show you how to practice with Traxler counter gambit. All the best and see you next time. For questions, you can contact me on my blog at www.chesslessons.wordpress.com. Thanks and see you next time. Bye.